some additional tech issues, please put those in the chat. Lonnie Silva is on the line. Lonnie's super awesome Zoom wizard. So if you do have questions, Lonnie can hopefully assist you via chat if you do have any issues with your Zoom. My name is Brianne Vales. If we have not met, I'm the manager for the Homeless Contribution Tax Credit, or HCTC. To get started, here's our agenda. We're going to start out with an elevator pitch resource. Then we're going to go to a tax benefit marketing tool. And both of those topics are going to be some presentation opportunities from a couple of nonprofit participants that volunteered to help us out today. Then we're going to move to peer learning breakout rooms. So these are going to be opportunities for you to talk to other nonprofit organizations about HCTC, how it's implemented at your organization, some fundraising tips, any of those burning questions you have that you'd love to ask another organization. This is your opportunity. After that, we'll move to some HCTC resources regarding fundraising, just to put those top of mind. And then we'll wrap up with the good old reminders and deadlines about HCTC coming up, because it's almost, we're wrapping up the end of 2025 almost. So there's some reminders to cover. First, we're going to talk about our fundraising tips from a couple of our nonprofit volunteers. This is hot off the press, an elevator pitch resource. So Lonnie will put a document link in the chat. But this elevator pitch example is several examples actually that we gathered from several nonprofits. So if you did contribute your elevator pitch to this list, thank you so much. I think that HCTC can be, you know, a little unique, a little challenging, because a tax credit, maybe donors don't know what that is or what it means. You know, and I know that it's a reduction in their state income tax liability. And you're able to offer that to them as hopefully an incentive to give to your organization or to give larger amounts. But sometimes it can be a challenge to communicate that to donors in a compelling and simple way. And so an elevator pitch, if you're not familiar with the term, is a short description that you could share with someone in the time it takes to ride an elevator. So short and sweet, basically. And so hopefully this document can be used with your staff at your organization, with your board members, to really tailor one of these statements, pick and choose, you know, some of the language here to really fit your organization and your mission and services. You can even use it in some of your written communications, like your emails, your social media, your website, all of those. You can kind of, you know, reuse some of that key targeted language throughout your communications. And so if you look at the examples in this document, a lot of times it's first off catching their attention with, have you heard about HCTC, and explaining what it is. And then at the end, making the ask or showing the impact of what a gift would do. So what's the impact of a gift at your organization? Because ultimately that's the main reason that a donor is going to give to your organization. It's going to be because they believe in your mission, they believe in supporting your services. HCTC is the cherry on top to really hopefully get them to give more to your organization. And so we have Steve Smith on the line from Christ Body Ministries, and he graciously volunteered to talk a little bit about how they have used an elevator pitch in their organization. So they're relatively new to HCTC, but have really jumped into utilizing their tax credit with donors. So Steve, thanks for joining. It
Sure.
looks like you're all connected and everything, so that's great. I was wondering, how have you used an elevator pitch in your organization's marketing or donor conversations?
Yes, and I'm here with Tiffany Beckford, Chief of Staff and Chief Operating Officer, and I'm Steve Smith, the Director of Finance here. Between the two of us, we communicate with almost all the donors.
Hmm.
And I know that I've got this mentioned in here somewhere, but just as we've got 100 of our 250 donors qualifying for the tax credit. We've really pushed this out, and it's most effective when you can do it one-on-one with the elevator speech. So we've been very thankful for that. And we've tried to keep it really simple. I've prepared some notes here. Let me just read from those, and it'll include the elevator speech as well. And you'll notice that I'm going to use the word cash. It's not cash, but the word cash gets everybody's attention. And then we get a chance to explain how the tax credit works. So it's a lot of this is trying to get them to focus in on this, because you know that there's going to be a lot of details behind it. But let me just kind of read from the notes that I've got, and I'll tell you when I begin the elevator speech. Our elevator pitch is a simple and direct way of communicating the benefit to our donors. All of their annual donations will give back 25% credit, which is like cash to them once they reach the $1,000 annual donation threshold that we've set. So we set ours at 1,000 purposely to try to make sure we could draw them up to at least that number. It's a great conversation starter in developing our relationship with the donor. We use this with most donors with whom we're face to face at various hosted events. And it could be a simple open house lunch that we're having here that's got donors at it. We want everyone to know about it. We communicate that something is, for us, as simple as a $100 a month donation is going to qualify in the month of October. We're looking for hooks that will help them pay attention and get the results that we want. We have, as I said, we have over 100 of our 250 donors that qualify, and we are completely driven by donations here. We're 100% donor funded. So let me take a moment to go into the speech. This typically will begin once we've been through some introductions. Hi, how are you? Hi, I'm Steve. And then I will begin with this. By the way, Christ Body Ministries is qualified to give you a 25% Colorado tax credit on your Colorado state tax return for annual donation totals of $1,000 or more. We worked hard to qualify for the Colorado Homeless Contribution Tax Credit and can have this sent to you for your 2025 tax year based on your annual donations of $1,000 or more. This is like real cash on April 15th. That's kind of the hook. Sometimes I'll wait there to see how they reacted to that. We just need your name as it appears on your tax return and the last four digits of your social security number. You can call me anytime to discuss this opportunity. And that's the end of it, the opening sequence of the elevator pitch. Most of the donors will engage at this point to learn more about it. And many have said, wow, I'm going to give more because I know that I already get 25% back. But most of them are even giving beyond that. That once again, they want to give to your organization. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next section. But it's just simple, and you're looking for a catchphrase to develop the relationship and develop the explanation with them. Once they've bought, in a sense, they understand what the benefit is to them. I mean, because it's purely a benefit to them that most of them weren't expecting. They're pleasantly surprised when you bring this up.
Hmm. Hmm. That's a great point, Steve. Um, if you have, that relationship with the donor, that's a key piece, I think, that you mentioned, bringing this up in the conversation. For those
Well,
of us who maybe struggle with the sales aspect of fundraising, so you don't necessarily get into nonprofit work to do sales or that type of thing, do you have any advice, just briefly,
I,
on how to use the elevator pitch tool?
I do. And we assume that a donor is going to be a donor for life. That is our goal in developing a relationship with that donor. And so we have folks that call them on the phone each month, different donors, and we've been able to successfully move our average donation amount up and recapture some lapsed donors. This organization's been around for 33 years. And I'm always amazed at when I see the new donors coming back in. All the donations cross my desk or Tiffany's desk. And so we're doing everything we can, and I know everybody is, but sometimes it feels like a sales pitch. And I'm going to tell you that you're not selling them anything with the HCTC. You're giving them a gift, and many of them didn't know that gift was there. If they didn't know, they gave to you anyway. Now you're telling them, hey, you're going to have a tax credit, which is like cash on April 15th. It's going to be money taken off any money that you owe. And that's why it's like cash to them on April 15th. But most donors really want to give to your organization and your purpose. You're not selling them, you're giving them something. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a gift they didn't expect. Your donors will appreciate you can offer this to them, and hopefully it'll lead to more conversations and a growing relationship. In fact, they may be able to share this with their friends. They're so excited. Hey, it's great. I got a tax credit. I gave to this organization and I was able to get a tax credit for my tax return. And they like to talk about those kind of things, right? We all do. So I would just be encouraging you not to think of it as sales, but it's a gift and they want to give to you. Now you're developing a relationship and able to give them something back. Tiffany,
No,
you think?
no,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah, that's been our experience.
Thank you. Thank you,
Sure.
Tiffany and Steve, for that advice. And yeah, I think that's all the questions we have time for right now, unless I'm not seeing any questions for Steve in the chat. But we'll have more time to chat within the breakout rooms as well, depending on who's in your
Thanks.
group. So thank you so much, Steve,
Oh,
for
you're
your
welcome.
time. And we're going to move on to the next topic, which is
Marketing.
the tax incentive marketing tool. And we even had a question in the chat about this. Tax advice. That seems, something like we're not qualified to do if you're not an accountant. That would be me. That would be Lonnie. We're not tax experts. We're not tax professionals. And so the information that you can provide or I can provide can be for educational purposes only and should not be taken as professional tax advice. And always encourage donors before making tax related decisions to consult with a tax professional. So that's when talking about the tax credit. Some donors, you know, based on their situation, they may not opt to do the tax credit because of how they do their deductions or whatnot. So that really is an individualized decision for the donor. But for the majority, it can be a great benefit as well. So next we're going to have Claire Smith from La Puente to join to share with us. So very generously, La Puente has offered to share this PDF tool of a graphic that they have used in their marketing. And we actually had a survey a couple of months ago from HCTC, and this was one of the requests, was a graphic like this that really shows some of the tax breakdown of the benefits of a charitable contribution that qualifies for a tax credit as well. And so thank you so much, Claire, for joining. Yeah, so I have the graphic pulled up here for everyone to see. Could you just start out by telling us what sparked the idea to create a marketing piece like this?
Sure, and thanks for having me. So a couple things sparked this. One, we are located in a very rural part of the state down in the San Luis Valley. And two, while we have quite a number of donors within the San Luis Valley, a decent percentage are located in other areas of the state, primarily Front Range communities. So due to our location, a lot of our mass kind of scale donor communications revolve around our quarterly newsletter publication. And while the publication, has stories from staff and volunteers and clients, we also insert this as just a one-page graphic. And I think it helps emphasize both the importance of giving and the benefits of doing so. And we're hoping that it does so in terms that are easy for the average person to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you start talking numbers, some people it's just hard to understand all of that. So just having it all on paper definitely seems helpful. Can you walk us through the amounts that we're seeing? You have the HCTC tax credit, you have the deduction amounts, you have the federal and state deduction amounts here, the amount reduced from what they would have paid in taxes. Could you talk through what that means?
Sure. So this graphic is based off of $1,000 donation. Because we are located in a rural area, we have a 30% tax credit versus the 25 that everyone who's in a metro area gets. So that's the difference that you'll see in the numbers. And if you did it probably, if you're based in the Denver or Springs area. Um, so 30% tax credit on the $1,000 donation provides a $300 tax credit to the donor and also reduces their taxable income amount to $700, which are those top numbers. Um, and so the tax credit is reducing the amount of tax the donor owes to the state, and it doesn't depend on tax brackets, while the tax deduction reduces how much of the donor's income is actually subject to taxes. And that part is what's varies based off of your marginal tax rate. So the tax credit's available for any Colorado tax filer, regardless of whether their taxes are itemized or not. And then in the example that we are using, it's basically we use the 22% tax bracket. And that is there's more than one tax bracket we could have used, but that seems to be one of the most common tax brackets that donors might fall into. And so under the 22, it's basically the formula is you're timesing the 700 for the federal tax savings by the 22% to get that $154 savings. And then for the Colorado tax, which is a 4.4%, we are multiplying it by that as well. And it comes out to $30.80. We rounded it up to 31 just to be more clear. I hope that is that helpful.
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
And, just a note here, HCTC is considered a benefit if they're going to, be itemizing their contributions. HCTC, is considered a benefit. And so that's why you see that remaining amount for the tax deduction at 700 instead of the full 1,000. So thank you for breaking all those numbers down, Claire. I'm not seeing any questions and if anyone has any questions for Claire regarding this marketing, please raise your hand or put those in the chat. Claire, do you have any thoughts on how you would handle a question from a donor who maybe they see this marketing piece and they have more questions about taxes, that gets a little more technical? How do you handle that?
I mean, it kind of does vary on what the specific question is, but generally the backup is basically, if they're eligible under, these guidelines, we can give them the tax certificate, but we do always suggest, go to your accountant, go to your tax person. Everyone's tax situation is very different depending on their tax bracket, depending do they itemize or not. There's so many kind of small details in this that make it very nuanced depending on your tax situation. So generally, if it's a more nuanced question, we might reach out to you guys at the state for clarification. And otherwise it would be, you talk to your tax person, definitely, because we're not tax advisors. And I think that's where when I first started doing processing these and kind of taking the helm of that was one of the anxieties I had, was how to convey this to people, because I didn't become a CPA for a reason, so
Yeah.
unless that's your field, a lot of us are kind of I think it makes people nervous when you hear taxes. So I think just to use that as a backup, that they can always talk to their tax person or people.
Right.
So
Well, thank you, Claire, for sharing, and hopefully this tool will be helpful to at least give an example of how this could be shared with your donors. So I think that's all the questions we have for you, Claire. Thanks so much for sharing today.
sure, happy to be here.
And yeah, for some of those more nuanced tax questions, we do, always refer to a tax professional. And then there are some guidelines on the IRS website. And we do defer, if IRS does have guidance on something, we do defer to that, even for HCTC. So you may see some of our guidance from the state pointing to the IRS website as well. So that can be a resource. All right, we're going to be moving to our peer learning groups. I'm very excited because this is the first time we're doing breakout rooms like this. So we have office hours periodically, but this is really an opportunity to talk with your peers about HCTC. So hopefully it wasn't too abrupt bringing everybody back in here. So, yeah, I was able to join a couple of rooms for a few minutes. Sounds like really good conversations. Um, yeah, and yeah, feel free to exchange contact information and whatnot, or if you want to email me and say, hey, do you have the email for such and such organization? I'm happy to connect you all to that. There was a question that came through on, the value of benefit received. So if they're at a fundraising event and they receive a free meal or some other auction item or something of that nature, the benefit amount does need to be taken out of the HCTC amount. And so providing documentation for that, um, I'm putting in the chat an IRS link that talks about some of that basically written acknowledgement that you can provide to the donor on the written acknowledgement for what is the actual value of their gift. So because that was a question that kind of came up as well. But otherwise, um, and thank you for Deanna putting that in the chat. So this is a disclaimer that Colorado Coalition for the Homeless uses when they're talking about the tax credit, especially regarding qualified charitable distributions. So another clarification from HCTC standpoint, we don't, we will accept a contribution that was a QCD. From a tax credit perspective, that's fine for us. But basically what we're hearing from a couple of nonprofits is that for donors, it's a little more complicated for that from the federal tax perspective. And so this is a disclaimer that they use in their communications. So thank you, Deanna, for sharing that. Is there any other, takeaways that your groups want to share that you feel like would be beneficial for the rest of the group? Go ahead and raise your hand or put that in the chat as well. Any other takeaways? I heard some, shared commiserations on the challenges of donors giving their information and things like that. I know it can be challenging, so glad you were able just to discuss some of that. If there's no other takeaways, I will go ahead and keep on going with the presentation. But thanks for everyone for participating. Program reminders. So I'm sure with it being November, your end of year giving, you're already, in the thick of it for those processes. I did want to highlight Colorado Gives Day. They actually presented to HCTC nonprofits last year. And I noticed on their website they have a couple of really good tools. So they have an actual marketing and advertising toolkit on their website, as well as other nonprofit resources. So Lonnie is putting these links in the chat for you if you're not familiar with them. Here's a link, when you go on, you can see the marketing and advertising toolkit where they have some graphics examples for you, ideas for um, getting the word out to your donors, and they even have some nonprofit success webinars that have been recorded. So if you do use Colorado Gives Day and we're not familiar with these opportunities to really maximize Colorado Gives Day for your organization, feel free to um, take a look at this. But yeah, Colorado Gives Day is coming up soon. Please note that you can include HCTC in your organization's profile. So you can include your tax credits there for donors to opt in to HCTC right there, front and center through Colorado Gives. And so it can be a very valuable resource to use. I also just wanted to share some of our resources that we have that maybe were off of your radar. So Lonnie is putting those in the chat as well. But we have this donor flyer that goes into what is HCTC. It's not as short and concise as an elevator pitch like we were talking about earlier, but this goes into more of the details of some of those frequently asked questions that donors have. So feel free to utilize this flyer whenever is helpful for you. And then with Canva, you are able to have a free account with Canva. It's a graphic design tool that can be free for you to use. And we at HCTC have some templates that you can use for Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So you can use these templates via your Canva login. And then last but not least, on the HCTC resources, we had a webinar last year where we had a fundraising one-on-one panel. And so hopefully this was a good opportunity for you. But if you really want to get back to the basics of, some of those fundraising tips for HCTC, feel free to watch that recording from last year. And there was a 10-minute presentation from Colorado Gives as well for a deep dive on that. All right, so we have some reminders of deadlines coming up. So we did post our 2026 approved nonprofits list. It is now on our website, so all of that is updated, ready to go. Thank you for going through that annual review process back in September where you confirmed all your information. Now all your updated information is on the website. I wanted to highlight these contribution entry deadlines for January, rolling this out hot off the press. So what we found last year is that for those donor entries, a few of those were missed in the certificates because our Salesforce platform picks up entries only if they're approved. So if a donor missed their deadline and you did not improve it on time and you have an annual certificate where all the contributions are bundled on that certificate, there were some donor entries out there that were missed. So to try to prevent that this year, we are advertising that donor entry should be submitted by January 23rd. And we suggest for you to tell your donors that as well. Now, I know, donors following instructions, there's only so much that you can do. You don't have control over them. But this is our suggestion to try to get ahead of those last minute entries. You as a nonprofit, we have January 30th as your deadline for those 2025 contribution entries to catch up on those. We will have office hours in December on the 10th, and then January 14th and 28th, we'll send those invitations out to your event calendar. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. When is the deadline for late submissions for 2024? There is no deadline for that. That late contribution form is still on the Salesforce platform and it's still working for 2024. So if you have someone who has a extension or a tax filing correction and they have to, request that late, that is still available on there. Brenda is asking, do you know if HCTC was approved for 2026? So the legislation that created HCTC approved it through the end of 2026. So yeah, keep advertising HCTC next year. You can still totally participate in the credit for 2026. The legislation would need to pass next year to continue it after 2026. So hopefully that clarifies. HCTC is, available this year and next year. We're looking at 2027 and beyond for that legislation to, if it were to continue HCTC. Allie's asking a clarification on the deadline. So the deadline is January 23rd. We're suggesting for donors to enter that time frame so that you'll have time to approve it by the time the certificates are created on February 1st. That date is not changing. And I should have put that date on the slide. I'm sorry about that. So February 1st is when those certificates will be available if you're on the annual or quarterly time frame. Hopefully that clarifies, Allie. Sorry about that. Other reminders. So in January, we'll start our annual report process. That deadline will be March 1st. We will have some targeted trainings available for you. So this year I'm wanting to kind of group the trainings based on those who use HMIS for some projects, participants in some organizations that do not use HMIS at all, to try to make everything more concise and clear for everyone. But this is important to inform your colleagues, your grant writers, your program managers who need to be looped in. Please be looping them in on the data that's going to need to be reported and not waiting until March 1st to start the conversation with them, but start that conversation with them on what that will look like. So we're going to provide more training, but I just wanted to put this on your radar for future. So those are all the reminders and deadlines that I had. We have a question in the chat. Can we enter donations into HCTC as they come in or only quarterly? Absolutely, you can do that as they come in. Quarterly is like our minimum threshold that we ask you to do. But if you, especially, end of year, you're going to have a lot more, volume of what you're trying to process. Absolutely, you can do that as frequently as you want. And Claire replied on that, just giving some advice. We do have, to wrap up, we do have a survey that Lonnie put in the chat. So basically just to provide your feedback on, was this event helpful? What did you like? What was not helpful? Would something like this be helpful in the future? Yeah, so like I said, this is the first time we tried the breakout room. So please just take 2 to 3 minutes to share your feedback. It looks like those are all the questions I saw in the chat. We'll go ahead and stop recording, but Lonnie and I will stay on the line in case we have any others with questions for us today. Thank you so much.